we're trying something new, sort of a book corner. And this is mostly because I read a lot of books. I mean, like a lot of books. And while my tastes are pretty broad, one of the things I focus on are books that I think can help me be a better project leader or a better facilitator. And Vicky, my amazing admin, said, why don't you start doing sort of a book review so that people can get a sense of whether or not some of these books might be things that they'd like to check out too. So our very first one is called Rituals for Virtual Meetings. And pardon me, because I'm going to glance down so I can make sure I get the title right. It's Creative Ways to Engage People and Strengthen Relationships Virtually. Pretty cool, huh? Anyway, one of the things that I really liked about this is that it's written by a team, which practically exemplifies everything that we talk about in project leadership, but also because they explain why these rituals work. And so I think part of the appeal is understanding that there is some definite science to this. And there's also a strength of a philosophical stand on it. So a couple of things. One of the first things that they do is talk about how, well, as human beings, we've had to adapt to lots of different technologies. And at the beginning, there was always this doom and gloom about how the technology was going to affect us as human beings. The thing is, when the pandemic hit and virtual meetings went from, I don't know, as much as 50% to a massive 90 to 100%, well, that was a little bit different because previous technical advances, you'd had days, weeks, months, years, decades to get used to them. And this time it was practically overnight. And the resulting shell shock and trauma, both psychologically, socially, and physically, to be blunt, has been pretty considerable. So there are a couple of rituals in here specifically that I'm fond of. And it turns out that because of the way they wrote the book and because of how useful it is, I'm going to be doing this in a couple of different parts. So part one is, well, a little bit of a setup on the book and two of the specific hints on how to start meetings with more intention and just quite possibly strengthening the relationships between the members of your teams. Now, when we moved to a virtual environment for so many of us, there was something we didn't realize, and it's this. People started talking pretty quickly about how commute times made for a nice transition from work to home. Yeah, but we weren't really talking about, maybe we didn't even realize the impact of the transition time between meetings. You know, that whole part about getting up and maybe running to the hallway facilities or grabbing another cup of coffee or tea or pop, and then heading into a different room sometimes not a different room, sometimes just a bunch of different people and a different seat to start the next meeting. So one of the first rituals that really caught my eye was one that suggests that you want to give people the opportunity to have a mindful transition between the meeting they just left and the meeting they're joining you in. Not a bad idea, right? Now, one of the things that I absolutely adore about this entire book is that every single ritual is set up with a backstory so that you know where it came from and why it works, so that you have a sense of what it's supposed to accomplish. And then, my favorite part, a step-by-step guide of how to deploy it. In this one, which is all about transitioning from meeting to meeting, you start the whole thing off by letting people know what you're doing and the authors will even tell you, sometimes people are going to be a little bit nervous about the very first time that you do this. But you explain exactly why you're asking them to take a few minutes, take a beat, a breath, so that you can leave the meeting you just left behind and bring yourself and your brain power to this meeting. Let them know that it's going to involve some deep breathing, and it's just going to be for a few moments. Time it for about 1.5 to 2 minutes. There are various senses of timings for different groups. The authors and I don't always have the same opinion. This has been working for me and my teams. Start out with, we're going to try something that's going to allow you to let go of the last meeting and really be fully present for this meeting. So it's going to involve some deep breathing and some mindful movement. In other words, I'm leaving the last meeting. I'm done with the last meeting. I am coming into this meeting. I know exactly what I want to accomplish in this meeting. And use what we call deep breathing with a purpose. So breathe in through your nose for a count of 4, hold for a count of 2, and then breathe out through your mouth for another count of 4, and hold again at the bottom of that breath for a count of 2. Even 30 seconds of that kind of breathing can be very helpful. And it may be the only moment that some of the people on your team have a chance to actually break. Another one of the rituals that I particularly like to start a meeting is called On Purpose. And the idea is that you talk to people about giving you in 10 words or less. Because let's face it, we all know some people who can do a whole paragraph in place of a single sentence. And I can identify those people because I are one. Well, sometimes, not always. So in 10 words or less, the idea is to find out what people think that they're there for and what they expect to get from the meeting. Now, this ritual is pretty common for those of us who facilitate classroom environments and educational experiences, because it's very important to make sure that we know what the expectations are as leaders, as facilitators, because some of those expectations may come as a surprise to you, and maybe not always a pleasant surprise. You need to make sure that you're able to level a few expectations if needed. Now, let people know that it's got to be 10 words or less. And then, and this is really important, for the purposes of diversity of thought process, etc., give them some time, about 30 seconds to 45 seconds, to actually think about it. You ask, why are you here at this meeting? You know, given the topic, what's the most important thing that you want to take out of this meeting? Then give them 30 to 45 seconds to think it over. In a virtual environment, one of the reasons why I have a difference in timing ideas than some of the authors do is because I work with folks who don't always have the greatest of internet access. Either because there are a lot of people in their household who are working virtually, or because they live out somewhere where maybe it's a little bit more remote and it's tougher to get a strong signal. So I'm used to there being a certain amount of latency, you know, a lag, and I want to make sure everybody has the chance to think about it. And then have people very quickly share. Now, if it's a small group, you can do this verbally, but if it's a larger group, it's not a bad idea to do it in the chat. And when I say small group, I'm talking about under 10. Okay, preferably 6 and under. Now, if anybody starts going a little bit haywire and they pass up those, 10-word limits, just kind of gently intervene, politely remind everyone that there is really a 10-minute limit. And then, based on what you've heard or read, then it's time to start leveling expectations. I'm going to try something in the next week or two where I actually combine those two rituals, because I think that it helps not just ground people in the meeting that they're in, but also give serious thought and be able to articulate what it is they expect to be able to get out of this meeting. I think that's going to be doubly productive. I may be wrong. I don't know, but I'll never know until I try. This is a new feature, so I'm dying to hear what you think of it. Give us a call, follow us, like us, or my contact information is always at the end of the video, and I encourage you to let us know what you think of this. As I said, there are going to be a couple of other segments on this book, Rituals for Virtual Meetings, because I think it's such an important topic. After that, we're going to be visiting with one of my personal heroes, the late Colin Powell. He wrote a book called Worked for Me. And I figured if it worked for him, it was worth learning a little bit. Now, that particular book, this is my second read. When he passed away, I thought, I want to revisit that wisdom. It's very pragmatic and practical. And just like this book, Rituals for Virtual Meetings, it doesn't say you should do this. It says, look, here's why this is not a bad idea. And it leaves it entirely up to you. One of the other things I like. And that's why we always try to make our videos here at KSP Partnership, the Leadership Driven Project Management Academy, pragmatic. Here are the things that work for us. Here's why they work. Here's how they work. Give it a shot and let us know. Thanks for joining us.